Some men may have issues with elevated levels of hematocrit and hemoglobin. Can you do phlebotomies too frequently as a way of lowering your hematocrit? We'll find out after this, so keep watching. So we're here with Dr. Touliatos and Nelson Vergel and Sam Cook, and we're going to be speaking about, can you lose too much iron from frequent phlebotomies, usually due to the fact that your hematocrit or hemoglobin is too high? So why don't we start with Nelson? What are your thoughts on loss of iron?
Well, there are different problems related to this issue. I mean, hematocrit increases some hematocrit red blood cells especially when starting testosterone. And it's a good thing for obviously those that have low red blood cells, anemia, patients with anemia. You obviously see an improvement in energy and all that. But in some cases, especially men that smoke and men that have sleep apnea, they're not getting enough oxygen through the night. When I say sleep apnea, untreated sleep apnea. Or men that are very sedentary and obviously not getting cardiovascular exercise, there's a tendency to have start increasing their hematocrit from a baseline of 47 all the way up, you name it. I've seen 60, 63, which is pretty amazing. In the States, we're seeing an improvement in monitoring. Definitely, clinics here are checking patients' hematocrit, which is a very cheap test, 3-4 months, 8 weeks after they start, and see what kind of raises they have. In most cases, I would say over 50% of what I've seen, it stabilizes in, maybe 50, 51. I've seen guys that live like me. I've lived with a 51 for 35 years.
Me too.
I've only donated twice at the beginning. So I tell other guys, don't despair. You're not gonna drop off a heart attack. There's a lot of fear mongering out there, but we have to be concerned, especially for the very sensitive. The guys are so sensitive to testosterone that their red blood cells just will not stop producing. A lot of doctors are making the mistake to sending patients every month to do blood donations or therapeutic phlebotomies, which is the same, just the blood donations, they actually use your blood to help somebody else, but the therapeutic phlebotomies are discarded. And that's another topic I don't want to get into. In the States, we do have the FDA that actually mandated that men on testosterone replacement can donate blood, even if their hematocrit is close to 53, which was a exclusion criteria before. But as I said, a lot of guys are going every month, and then by the second month, they start feeling horrible. They're feeling tired, depressed, their libido's low, their erectile function is pretty bad. So they're basically even worse than baseline. And the doctors don't tell them, hey, let's test your iron, or let's put you on an iron supplement, or whatever it is. So that's very concerning. I'm still seeing it, not as much as I did 10 years ago. So I've seen a lot of progress here in the States on that subject. But I don't see enough clinics checking men's iron blood levels. I don't see enough clinics checking ferritin, which is related to the iron concept. I really don't see that. So especially men that are at week 8 or week 12 follow-up, they're feeling really tired, depressed. I mean, they're complaining that testosterone is not working, and they have donated at least once or twice. You have to be very careful. So that's my concern. No testing. There's hardly any testing on iron. The Red Cross here in the States has a rule that you should not donate more frequently than every 56 days. And sometimes I don't know why people have phlebotomies even more frequent than that, and they're allowed. So I'm concerned. I just say to the guys that are having this problem, some guys are not able to control their hematocrit. Some people take a grapefruit extract. George actually found out that maybe losartan works. I posted a study on that, which is a blood pressure med. Decreasing your dose, which is actually becoming the trend, doing frequent, more like lower doses, making sure that you get tested for sleep apnea. And now we have gadgets that we can use at home. I have one, it's an oxygen meter I put on my hand. It's connected to an app on the cell phone, and I can actually see my oxygen saturation at night. And that's really, and obviously, if you're smoking cigarettes or even daily pot and doing testosterone, you're asking for trouble. You're depriving your lungs of oxygen. Your red blood cells are going to go up even higher. So that's really all I wanted to say in this subject. George will expand. I probably will think of other things.
I was going to say, Nelson, that at our clinic, one of the first tests, the comprehensive test that you get, has both iron, ferritin, TIBC, some iron studies to make sure, and also on treatment, we're looking at that as well. So, and I think people in the US can get blood tests from your discounted labs as well.
Yeah. Here in the US, you can buy your own blood test without seeing a doctor. It's a direct-to-consumer thing. I don't know, in the UK, I think it's getting a little more flexible, I hope.
Yeah, we've as part of our clinic, we're able to order tests, and we also have the ability for patients to order them online through our website. So, we've been one of the earlier ones to be able to get blood tests to patients as they need it. So it's a very much patient-led, not doctor-led process. So, so George, I know you've given blood frequently, and you've struggled with your red blood cell count, your hematocrit, and what are your thoughts on too frequent donations, and any negative issues that you found when you've given blood too much? Have you lowered or depleted your iron levels?
Yes, so I know in firsthand, because I'm really sensitive and prone perhaps to erythrocytosis. However, I do not have polycythemia vera, and this is because of two reasons. First of all, my platelets, my thrombocytes are not super high. So under polycythemia vera, there's a higher tendency for clotting, because also thrombocytes or platelets are elevated. So number one is this. And so number two, I checked my EPO, and the hematologist told me that under polycythemia vera, the EPO has to be really low, 0 or 1. Mine was 4, so there's no case of that. However, when I was diagnosed with hypogonadism, I was actually 7 months off from steroids after my last PCT in order to, when I finished my bodybuilding career, and my testosterone was 150. My hematocrit was never below 45. So technically, I'll never die from anemia, But on the other hand, by using steroids or testosterone under low dose will lead you to the other end, which is erythrocytosis, since steroids fight anemia. So the point is, if you do therapeutic phlebotomies or blood donations, basically you run out of iron stores, and then you have fatigue, low ferritin also. Recently, this week, actually, there was a study by MD Thomas O'Connor, who pointed out that elevated iron has higher mortality rates. So perhaps having not high iron or mid-range or below makes you less vulnerable to mortality, because there is an association with this. But personally, sometimes I feel really fatigued, exhausted, even though I'm taking tons of supplements, and my testosterone, my GH, and my little DECA. Then I check out my iron levels, and I have to tell you, they are very close to the lowest range. So for a couple then of weeks, I'm eating beef with extra vitamin C in order to, vitamin C actually is the catalyst for absorption of iron into the small intestine, okay? But this is a fact. And actually about blood donations, if you overdo it, sooner than 60 days or perhaps 90 days, there is a rebound effect to the bone marrow that kicks more red blood cells, because the lifespan of erythrocytes are 90 to 120 days. So practically every 3 or 4 months you should donate. Otherwise, you have a negative effect, and the bone marrow kicks for erythrocytes because it may suspect of a technical anemia, So it has the opposite effect. So basically, you have to donate between 3 or 4 times a year.
You're saying that's like the most frequent you should probably do based on that, potentially. So not more frequent than 3 or 4 months.
I've done the mistake of donating of this every 6 weeks, perhaps. And, in the long term, it had the opposite effect. My hematocrit strangely was elevating, and they told me there is this possibility of stimulating too much the bone marrow because it suspects a technical anemia,
I had a guy a couple of guys where this happened, where they were given Nebido every 10 to 12 weeks, and they were getting high hematocrit peaks, probably because of the build-up for them. It went too high. So they were doing Nebido every 3 months, but every month they were donating blood. And I don't know when it started, but it might have been this effect where, okay, it was high because of the initial libido, maybe build up for them. And then the doctor was like, well, donate 2 pints of blood. And then it just kept, you know, stimulating through that reaction maybe, but unbelievable. I do know that there's like a small group of people, and I don't know whether it's theoretical, I'm not really sure of the evidence, that say that in men in particular, that donating blood so that the iron goes lower and then letting it build again, they believe that iron stores in the body will draw out, if that makes sense, so that you actually, you know how in like hemochromatosis we get a buildup of iron, and it can be in organs and things. That apparently that they believe that actually, I think Carl Lenore spoke about it. So he was talking about somebody doing this, where they think they actually do it to try and draw the iron. Because he was saying like he said something like there will be elements of the first hamburger that you've ever eaten still in your body because of the stores, is what they were just describing. Not sure what the evidence is behind it, but yeah, I wonder whether there's any benefit to that.
Now, about the video you said about, sorry, nothing else.
Well, you know, I mean, we've seen, obviously, women tend to live longer than men, okay? And even though they go through childbirth, which is probably the hardest thing anybody can do, and we don't do it as men, they have better estrogen levels before menopause, obviously. So that helps them with, you know, endothelial function, and lipids are better than ours. Their HDL is higher than ours because of that. But they also menstruate. They menstruate and lose iron. So their iron levels tend to be lower than men too. They live longer. So I do believe, and there's actually one meta-analysis of men who donate blood every 6 months or so. I forget which reference I saw an Excel mail that actually found longer survival in men that donate. Obviously, you can go to too frequent donations, and having anemia is not a good thing to, I think actually your mortality increases. So yes, I think there's iron, obviously can be toxic to the liver, toxic to everything.
To the brain?
And to the brain, everything. But we have, having healthy iron helps. So I do believe, obviously, that accumulating iron with increasing, I mean, I've seen guys with 62 hematocrit where they have high blood pressure, high viscosity in the blood, obviously, headaches. When they go to the gym and work out, they become sort of purple. I see that. So it's not all about mortality and cardiovascular health in the long term, but it's also the blood pressure issue, the headaches. They're getting winded going up the stairs. So there are some guys, I've seen some crazy people on YouTube saying that you don't have to control hematocrit because obviously high altitude people in Peru and high altitudes, their bodies adapt to the higher hematocrit because of their lower oxygen levels up there. They forget to say that at sea level, we have a certain partial pressure of oxygen that is very different. It's a lot lighter, a lot lower in high altitude. So the vessels, our blood vessels, tend to dilate and contract differently. So we're not the same animals. If you live in Peru, in the Andes, we're not the same, we don't have the same cardiovascular elasticity and endothelial function. So they forget to know that there's a difference living in high altitudes when it comes to pressure. So anyways, I don't know where I'm getting at.
Doctor, when you went to Mexico City, you stayed there for a while, you had a vacation perhaps. Did you notice any headaches or short of breath that perhaps will stimulate your hematocrit?
Oh yeah, I think, or Denver, but Mexico City is higher than Denver. Yes. Yeah, and out of breath, headaches, trying to go up to the Chapultepec castle in Mexico City, it's a big deal. It doesn't get better. You have to wait probably 5 days to a week for your body to start adjusting, to that. And yeah, I'm sure my hematocrit goes up there. But to say that if I lived in Mexico City long term, and I've seen the data on altitudes, hematocrit goes up around 54, 55 max and stays there. Nobody goes up to a 60, a 58, 62 in high altitudes. Their bodies adjust.
This is what endurance athletes do. They go to Mexico, they train there, and they return back.
Well, you have to breathe that polluted air too, so that's another issue. But and Denver is well known for Olympic training in Colorado because of the altitude. So, I definitely think increased hematocrit is the number one side effect of TRT. I think is an easier one to control if you do it right. I also think it's a most mismanaged side effect by clinics around the world. Some doctors even stop TRT when their patient's hematocrit goes up to 53. That's pretty.
But actually, it's the hemoglobin that's more reliable because hematocrit can be pseudo-elevated under dehydration. So,
yeah, and also hydration. Yeah, if you're, yeah.
The critical number is 18. So 3 times 18 is 54%. Yeah. So I guess you may have 17 hemoglobin and 56 hematocrit because you're dehydrated and you still can donate blood.
Yeah, I tell guys, hydrate before, make sure you drink enough water before, because they do test your hematocrit. It's always off by 3 points when I did do it with the little machines they have there at blood centers. So make sure you hydrate very well. We should be hydrated very well. I'm constantly drinking water because I'm really over conscious.
It's hot in Dallas. Is it hot? I guess it's
Houston is hot too. Yeah, but we live in air conditioning. We live in cooler weather, you guys. So but anyway, yeah, that's why I think we cannot talk enough about this issue, because it's happening in 2020 as frequently or more frequently than it happened when I wrote my book 11 years ago.
Some people are really blessed not to elevate hematocrit. They remain to 45 and they blast thirds,
What happens with us, me, and I just realized this 2 months ago. I mean, I thought I had reached a plateau in my learning curve. My ferritin is low. My ferritin is 24, which is on the low side of the range. And a lot of us, what happens, the body adjusts and lowers the ferritin, which is really the transport protein for iron.
It's also inflammation marker. You can elevate it's also inflammation marker.
Yeah, but my iron, my TIBC, all of it is normal. And all my inflammatory, because I sell blood tests for a living. So I did all my inflammatory markers are all beautiful. And there's actually 2 references I actually was able to pull, because I said, wait a minute. And I started taking iron, and I said, well, I shouldn't, my iron is normal. So iron is normal, ferritin is low. And there's actually, that's something that a lot in this paper, I'll forward, actually can post it on the comment section of this video, that a lot of us, especially the ones that have normal or stable hematocrit, tend to have lower ferritin because our body's readjusted to that balance. So that's something I just learned.
What I have observed is that when my hemoglobin elevates, my platelets go down. This is compensation from the bone marrow in order to protect against thrombotic effects, And when my hemoglobin drops with losartan, my platelets go higher,
Yeah, I guess, homeostasis, the body's always trying to balance constantly, and sometimes we're not obviously balancing that well. So we have
well, perhaps we all have a different set point. Maybe the understanding for where the range is for optimal, blood viscosity should be. So it sounds like what you're saying is we need to have somewhat of a kind of a balanced approach. If there is going to be an intervention for blood for phlebotomy or bloodlettings, you may not need to do them as often, and make sure you monitor the ferritin and iron levels. Is that what we're saying?
They're cheap tests. I know the pricing here in the States, so it's not like they're expensive tests. It will be good to check somebody's iron and ferritin twice a year. If obviously you're adding to the cost of monitoring, because it's all about cost here in the States. It's mostly the best TRT clinics are cash-based. So obviously people say, why don't we run GH levels and all this a baseline? Well, the more you run, the more it costs the patient. So, but at least for follow-up, for sure, somebody is at least for follow-up, at least after the first donation. I mean, I'm even gonna run a special and a really cheap iron test for those that are donating, more than they should, or even the ones that are donating over 56 days, because it's a test that doctors and patients are complaining about fatigue and about all these symptoms, and they give them an anastrozole and they give them HCG and they give them, all kinds of, and they never look at the iron store. So I know I sound like a broken record, but it's not rocket science. You know what I mean? This is not rocket science, but it is probably the biggest problem I see out there. in clinics in this country, in the United States at least.
Well, like I said, here at Balance for Hormones in the UK, that test is incorporated in the beginning 6 months and at 1 year and nearly thereafter, unless there are blood donations, they are monitored. So what do you think, Sam?
Yeah, no, I think it's a good summary. I mean, yeah, good information on sort of how it all links together. And like you're saying, watching out for things like sleep apnea and those other things can be really helpful. And I like that pulse oximeter thing at night as well. Maybe we need to see if there's more of those available in the UK, because that's what they give you at the doctors if you go in with sleep apnea.
Yeah, they're $40 here on Amazon, and it's great. I've tried several, but there's one that actually posted an Excel mail that it's the app actually, every morning I look at my graph. I stopped doing that because I know more or less where I am, how many dips and how low of the oxygen dips I'm having, because I do have mild sleep apnea, but I tried a CPAP and I just couldn't. I could not do it.
When you sleep on your left side,
yeah,
it's less likely for the jaw to open up, you know?
I sleep on my side. But it's worse if you sleep on the back, man.
Yes,
I don't do that. I can't even. So yeah, apnea, undiagnosed apnea, I think is a big, big problem. You guys hook up with apnea clinics, or how do you guys do that in Balance?
So in Greece, they give you this CPAP mask, and they sell it really expensive. These other how you call these specialists for the ear, for the throat. So yes, and after they tell you to drop 50 pounds of weight if you are obese, because it's less likely when you have a huge neck for the airways, they get obstructed, you know, the throat. So no, my wonder is that if testosterone will lead you to obstructive sleep apnea because the neck muscles enlarge, and perhaps then if you lift weights, you're gonna lead to a higher neck, and then perhaps some snoring that leads to apnea.
Yeah, but there's also a central effect. You know, there's obstructive sleep apnea and central. There's data on the central effects of testosterone replacement and all androgens on the central aspect of it too. So even that's something I learned too. I thought only heavier guys or even high BMI guys, even, you know, obviously muscular guys with big necks over 16 inches, 17 inches have apnea, but no, I've seen a few thin people that is mostly central in nature, the brain basically. So there's data on both, on obstructive and central. And here in the States, there is an exclusion criteria for TRT, obviously PSA over 4, which, you know, is now debatable, but Haematocrit over 51, because anybody that already comes in at baseline before they start testosterone at that kind of Haematocrit, either A, they're smoking, B, they have huge apnea issues. Or like you say, you can live in high altitude, but you know, they actually, most good doctors here will not give you TRT until that is resolved. So.
Great. Yeah, I mean, here in the UK, there are private options and things, but the NHS will deal with it. It's just sort of you have to go in and you deal with a GP that gives you a questionnaire, and you have to score over a certain number. And it's quite extreme. It's things like to score to go through for a referral. You've got to say that you're falling asleep when you read a book. Like, it's highly likely. You fall asleep when you're in the car. It's highly likely.
After a meal also.
After a meal, that's highly likely. But the number of guys that lie on those things to get through and then get a diagnosis of sleep apnea, it doesn't correlate with the actual, you know, true symptoms of it. So that's what we have here. There are some private options and things, but the NHS generally will pick things up. And you're right about the, I've been to sleep apnea clinic, and in the waiting room, there's like some big guys, and then there's some very skinny, you know, clearly not obstructive issues going on unless they've got a strange jaw. So yeah, they mentioned about obviously the central part as well being another cause, but yeah, very interesting. Is that good summary for things? Do you think that's?
Yeah, I think that's good. I mean, we touched on the dangers of the loss of iron with frequent phlebotomies and donations, but we also talked about how sleep apnea may play a role in elevating the hematocrit, which then leads one to getting the phlebotomies in the first place. So it sounds like a kind of a balanced, sensible approach. Don't let the iron get too low and or too high, and monitor it properly with blood tests. So yeah, thanks Nelson and George and Sam for joining us on this one, and we'll do another one soon. If you liked what you've seen, please press like and do subscribe to the channel, and we'll have more content coming. So thanks again, everyone, and we'll see you next time.
Yes, thank you.